I will first introduce our first keynote speaker of today, Professor Marieta from the University of Western Cape in South Africa. Her topic will be leadership development in higher education, insights from interventions and the selected research in South Africa. So now I would like to give the floor to Professor Marieta.
Thank you so much, Prof. Zhu, and thank you so much for the opportunity. If you could just give me a second that I can share my slides. All right. Excellent. Wow. So firstly, thank you so much to everybody for accepting me into the network and also into the talk today. I see it as a privilege to be able to talk to like-minded colleagues. And interestingly enough, as this is my first meeting that I attend and I'm the first to present, I probably didn't have the best idea of what to expect. And what I thought I would do is share with you what it is that we are busy with, give some ideas of some of our outputs and some of our projects, and to just welcome thoughts, ideas, and collaboration on that. So as mentioned, I'm from the University of the Western Cape. So Western Cape, obviously Cape Town, situated at the far point of Africa. And then also there are three major universities in the Cape Town area, of which two of them are better known than the University of the Western Cape. One of those is University of Cape Town. They are situated more towards Table Mountain that you can see there. And then also Stellenbosch University, which is situated more towards the Winelands area. And so the University of the Western Cape has a unique history in that sense. You will see in the picture that I have here that we have a very flat area in the sense of where the university is at. And traditionally it was known as the Cape Flats. And so the University of the Western Cape is also known as in South Africa, called a historically disadvantaged institution, which is a word that meant that in the apartheid time, it was a university that was created for people of color. And so specifically UWC was for the colored, the individuals, and they could only study education at this university. Nevertheless, the university has grown to such an extent that it competes and outperforms some of the historically white universities. And so we come with a very proud tradition in the sense of just how one has grown. In that sense, also, there's a great love for leadership and also to bring about change in leadership in Africa and not just within our own university. But I will talk about that a little more as we go along. And so we have a research area, a research niche area, if we want to call it that, specifically with the topic of leadership in higher education. And we aim to really be evidence-based and future-oriented, both to be practical, to equip leaders, but also in a way that prioritizes long-term sustainability and ethical responsibility. And so maybe a little bit about me. I am a professor of what we call industrial organizational psychology. Some of you may know it better as work psychology. And we are situated in the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences. So more of a business science. And prior to my time of joining the University of the Western Cape in an academic capacity, I spent time in the private sector, corporate and consulting, mostly involved in leadership development and coaching. And so it's been an interesting journey to take that learning and to bring it into the academe. And it took me quite a few years to firstly really understand academia well enough in order to see how one can translate some of those leadership principles to the academic world, but also what the academic world really has to teach business in the same way. The alignment and focus, it's very much, as Prof. Zhu has mentioned, about the lead academic network. So the idea is to impact through interdisciplinary, collaborative research, to build research and leadership capability, and also to work with leadership as a transversal skill. So we were shocked at some stage to see that there is not one course in our curriculum that has the name leadership. So not even in the economic and management sciences or in any other part of the university. And so as much as that is important that we teach leadership and the skill to our students specifically, It's also for me important that we teach it as a transversal skill, that in everything that you are doing, you need the skill of leadership. In a very similar fashion, we found many of our senior academic members who have never had any exposure to leadership training. For me, coming from business, that was a major surprise because probably almost everybody, even if they don't want to, are exposed to leadership training. But it's not necessarily the same in the academic world. And when I talk about it, I don't only talk about those in formal positions, such as being head of departments or deans or directors, because they get very job-specific training in the sense of how to fill in certain forms and what are the governance processes. But the inner work of leadership is not necessarily always done. And so we also align on the right-hand side of my slide. I have some of the South African initiatives of what we align our work to. And part of that is to address the societal grand challenges with the decadal plan. It's one of our initiatives in terms of bringing about transformation. And then also our NRF, our National Research Foundation, is very interested in a transformed research workforce that's internationally competitive and sustainable. And to our minds, obviously, one needs to have some leadership training in order to be able to achieve that. Apart from all of these initiatives and what shall we call it, national imperatives, global imperatives, there's also an indication that there's quite a bit of a need of research from Africa and specifically, and also then South Africa, where I am from. This particular picture that I'm showing you is the global distribution of sustainable leadership literature, so specifically sustainable leadership. And so while South Africa is showing some performance in terms of Africa, we are still lagging far behind in terms of, for instance, United States and so forth. And zooming in, if we look at it specifically in the area of higher education, if I can cite Mantry et al.'s review, 2023 review, Australia is leading the pack. So if we look at the number of publications, the last column there, they are leading the pack, followed by the United Kingdom and so forth. And of course, shockingly, we don't even have an African country on this list. Excuse me, just a minute. Sorry about that. So as much as I know that any kind of review is sometimes limited by the keywords and the types of journals that we look at, it is somewhat disheartening to see that it may be that we are not necessarily including the African voice into what it is that we are doing and what we are studying as leadership. So whilst I do believe that there's a global conceptualization of leadership, I do believe that all the different cultures and all the different elements could be diversified and widened by looking at it. For instance, within the South African and African sense, collaboration in the sense of Ubuntu is a very important part. So it's not just about the individualism of myself advancing as leader, but if I don't take somebody alongside me as I do that, then I'm actually not being successful as an African leader. So we try to incorporate the different elements that the culture brings. And also, I think in the sense of, in Africa, as you probably all very well know, resources are limited. So also, for instance, a university like ours, which is historically disadvantaged, meaning also that we don't have lots of alumni funding. We are dependent on grants from the state or international grants, which sometimes limits what you could do, but on the other hand, invites and challenges a lot of leadership, creativity, and entrepreneurship in trying to find ways and means of bringing about change without necessarily digging into a lot of resources. Here are some of our research outputs that we've produced in the last few years. This is not a comprehensive list, but maybe just to give you an idea of what it is that our research area has been studying. And when I'm talking about the research area, I see my PhD students, my master students, fellow colleagues, collaborators. I see all as part of our research team. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, we had very fruitful time in terms of doing research and publishing some research around it, but also to understand what was happening in the higher education space, particularly within South Africa. And I'm sure that this is not unique to us, but in our case, it really, really heightens the sense of inequality. So suddenly all the transformation that we've made suddenly fell apart as all individuals had to go home. Our students needed to do online learning, but they didn't have laptops. So we sent them laptops. But in some of the communities where they live, there is no access to internet. And definitely, unfortunately, no access to electricity. So the gap widened again. And so we wrote a piece about South African higher education institutions at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic and used the sense-making model and also just to talk about lessons learned from that process and also specifically leadership lessons that came about. And interesting that we are seeing in many of our research endeavors to try and establish what is the post-pandemic leader in the academic space. Incidentally, also in the business case, but in the particular in the higher education space, is that the absolute most important characteristic, capability, competency of leaders that are being asked for is empathy. So the human element is coming through still very, very strongly. And that's what we learned from this, is that we have to look at situations with empathy. We have to manage with empathy. And so also we need to teach empathy because not everybody has it or has the ability to be able to tap into it. We also did further studies, for instance, on academic career progression. This particular study looked at the different levels, so the early career, mid-career, and established career researchers, and what are some of their needs during that period. We found also that a lot of the energy is focused on the early career researchers, but when it comes to the mid-career researchers and established researchers, oftentimes there isn't as much support or initiatives that they can tap into. And as that was identified as a gap and a void, it is something that we took some time in the university to work on a program, which I will talk to you a little bit later. Okay. We also had a look based on the inequality, had a look at the gender perspectives. And so I was part of a large project that looked at academic women and just what the effect of the pandemic was on their particular experiences. And this paper we wrote about self-esteem. And unfortunately, our women academics suffered quite a bit of self-esteem difficulties as they felt that they were no longer working from home, but living at work, also needing to homeschool, and in many ways needing to take over all of the household activities, caring, cleaning, cooking, and so forth. And so again, so we thought that there was some emancipation, but still it seems that we went back a few steps. In another project, we are looking at the experiences of contract or seasonal temporary academic workers, so those who do not have permanent employment. And maybe just to anchor that to say is within South Africa, even from your lower level position in the university, you are employed permanently. So it's not a tenured type of approach where you only get tenure later. But we do also have seasonal workers. So maybe there's a course that's oversubscribed and we need to get an extra person to teach it. So they're a contract academic. But that type of work is quite precarious in the sense that there's high job insecurity linked with it. There is no guarantee of contracts being extended. And so our academics feel that they're living in limbo and not getting access to possible career management opportunities. So we're trying to look into that front as well. Furthermore, we looked at factors influencing leadership effectiveness. We've been looking at our academic leadership programs and evaluating those as we go along to try and ensure that we hold an evidence-based practice in terms of improving our programs. And on the other side, we also did studies on wellness needs, job demands, job resources of academic employees in order to see how we could build that into the leadership development and also to equip our leaders in order to deal with what our academics are experiencing in the workplace. So what we did is, based on our identification that there is a gap specifically for the mid-career individuals in the university, because the established career individuals said mostly that they don't need as much support. They know what they want to do, they just need money to do so. But our mid-career stage, we developed a leadership program for them. And this program was not just, it wasn't necessarily focused on, for instance, research chairs or heads of department, those informal positions of leadership, but rather those who show promise of research leadership. And our program composes of 4 elements. It's not rocket science in any kind of way, but it was just put together in a way that is understandable and palatable for our group of individuals. We call it the PEEP program. And just to say also, this was developed in conjunction with our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research and Innovation, Professor José France, who may be familiar to many of you. And our program consists of about 6 days of training that is run over a period of a year, looking at purpose. Self-awareness is done through the purpose module using a personality profile, and also helping the individuals to kind of like rekindle their leadership vision and passion. At this stage, many of them don't even see themselves as leaders. So the big aha moment is oftentimes where they actually see how much influence they have as a leader and how they need to steward that much better. Our equipping module is aimed at teaching particular skills. We look at leadership theories and competencies, resilience. We teach them coaching types of skills that they could use with those that they work with. In module 3, we open it up and grow wider and looking at the global environment. We have a look at people's leadership journeys. So we also get the stories from others. And also we look at what is it that helps individuals to thrive in the institution, and how could that be created? We finalize with a module on people, which is all about how do you influence, how do you network, how do you adapt to another person's personality now that they understand personality types in order to have influential conversations. The training element here only forms one part of it, although quite a major part of it, but it is supported by individual professional coaching sessions. And the coaches that we use, we have some of them that are academics, but we also have some professional business coaches that we draw in. And individuals get 6 sessions with that professional coach. And then also 3 academic mentoring sessions where the individual is paired up with an academic within the university. This is, by the way, one of the things that's always part of what we do at the University of the Western Cape. There's always a mentorship. If you want to apply for a grant, you get a mentor for that. If you want to do a rating or whatever it may be, you would get a mentor for that. Our students call it the koppel culture. Okay, so koppel is an Afrikaans word, an Afrikaans derivative of Dutch, and Flemish would also understand it. So koppel means coupling, so literally putting things together. So there's a koppel culture, so you never have to do something alone. There's always going to be a mentor that is linked to you. And so we reinforce that culture through our training. Then also as part of it, there is funding for the particular individual to be able to go on an international collaboration visit or to use the money for project funding. Okay. Now, of course, all of this is dependent on grant funding. You can imagine that there's some big money involved here. And the dilemma, I suppose, is the scale. So based on the funding, we're only able to reach a number of individuals. This year, we had 20 participants in our program. And I think that there may be many more that may be in need of the particular program. Sorry about that. And so whilst our passion and our focus obviously is within our own home institution, we've run this program last year and we've just completed our students, graduated last week, Friday, from the program, the 2023 cohort. But the need is so great within our country, but also within the continent, that we created the reduced version of the program of a 4-day intervention, unfortunately without the coaching and the mentoring and the international collaboration. And we presented that to colleagues at University of Botswana last year. We presented, I don't have it on this list, but also to another university in South Africa, Central University of Technology. And then there was also a group of individuals from the University of Namibia that participated in the program this year. Now, we won't be doing a good job if we're not doing any research about what it is that we are doing. So we've completed, as part of our research project, the interviews with those from Botswana, Namibia, and the 2022 cohort from UWC, and we'll soon do the 2023 cohort. And the study is conceptualized as a tracer study. So these individuals will be traced, and within 3 years' time, we will connect with them again to see what possibly may have been the influence of this leadership program on their development. There's some preliminary outcomes. Look, this was very preliminary, so this is not the most impressive just yet. In a year's time, I hope to have a much longer list for you, but we've already been able to present the program at a conference, and also we've extracted the elements of coaching and coaching experiences to have that as part of a conference proceeding. Also, not my own program or the one that I'm managing, but that I'm collaborating with colleagues from our co-lab, so our collaborative lab at the University of the Western Cape for e-inclusion and social innovation, digital transformation, the leadership perspective. This program is currently in a pilot phase, so there's a pilot group of academics that's going through this training program with the particular modules that I have listed on the screen. And yeah, so I think there's really initiative and growth in terms of the thinking around leadership development and how we prioritize and give time and attention to it. Just some of the ideas going forward. Again, nothing rocket science. It's all just the everyday discipline of doing it. We would really like to strengthen our collaboration with other universities, but for many different reasons. The combination of input into what it is that we do, to be able to have some elements of our leadership program, for instance, presented by individuals from other universities is very, very helpful. It helps with creating that perspective. I'll say it because I'm mindful that some of our participants have never traveled outside of Cape Town. Okay, so there is a lot that can be done just by sharing from different areas and different cultures. Also, from a research perspective, obviously, we would like to see how we could advance what it is that we're doing. We really hope to get an African footprint on all of those bibliometric statistics that I showed you. So there should be a little bit more coming up, and that the African voice and what we can contribute could be part of it. We will continue to publicize our articles and chapters and so forth. We will continue to do our leadership development interventions and continuously to improve them as we do go along, to keep on working with our PhD students and masters. And really, this is with the idea to grow and transform the researcher cohort. Okay, so still most of our students are classified as Black. And so this really is giving us a great opportunity in order to bring about transformation. Because those individuals go out and they are the ones who have to carry the baton of leadership. So that is an important part for us. And so we continue to have even engagements such as this, where we present on public platforms to talk about what it is that we're doing, what it is that we can offer, and also where we think that we could collaborate in that area. Okay. Right, and that's a little bit of my story. I had hoped to leave a bit of time for questions, so if there is anything that I could assist with, I'm happy to answer. I've also placed my details here for you. You're most welcome to connect with me. If you get it out of office, just know it's our summer recess coming up, so it may be a bit of time before I respond to you, but I would really like in order to be able to discuss and collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Marieta from UWC. Indeed, thank you very much for your excellent presentation, especially about the introduction of the leadership training program. Maybe we can have a short question if someone would like to ask a question shortly before we move to the next keynote speech.
Thank you, Professor. I see a participant asked a question in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, it's regarding the training program. Yeah, I think maybe this can be also contacted later on. Yeah, whether the questions will be only with specific target groups or it's whether it's open to the public. I see Professor Yasha raised your hand. Maybe Professor Yasha?
Yes, Professor Marieta, thank you very much. Very inspiring work on leadership. Actually, I captured several ideas, but you mentioned that you're working on leadership effectiveness. You have a study on leadership effectiveness. I'm wondering about the indicators of leadership effectiveness. Which indicators did you use? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yasser. I appreciate the question. In that particular study, we looked at particular leadership traits and behaviors, and it was a qualitative study. So in that sense, it was the individual's own perception of what is that leadership effectiveness. It has been something that we've struggled with quite a bit. So I have some of my master students working also on studies of institutional performance, and quantitatively have struggled to find a very relevant measure that is related to institutional performance. One of the ones that we are using is almost like a benchmarking one. So it asks questions about, I think that my institution is performing well in comparison to other similar institutions, or I believe that my institution is investing in people similar to other institutions. So we've been using those types, but it is an area of development really for us.
Yeah.
Because we, I think this is part of it, but the rankings is not a reliable way to do so, because depending on what you look at, the ranking will be different. Student throughput is difficult to use, so it's quite a complex matter. And we try our best to at least to describe what it is that we are looking at in that particular case.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Professor Marieta, and also Professor Yasha, for the question.